All right, happy Monday. Welcome to a valuable coaching volleyball edition. Miles Holland here with Coach Kevin Pratt. Today we're going to talk about practice planning a little bit and take a look at some of our ideas of practice planning, some of the coaches we've been around and how they plan practice. So, Coach Pratt, how do you like going about planning your practices when you got practice coming up?
Well, first and foremost, I think it's important to acknowledge, kind of where I got my ideas from. And I truly believe Coach Joe Wortman was extremely powerful with lesson planning. And he was once a teacher and it showed. And I really appreciated when Coach Wortman, when I got there, one thing he did a phenomenal job with, and it was part of our culture, is he had a quote of the day and we would reflect and we'd talk about how that belongs in our program and why that quote's important. And when we'd be playing powerful matches against teams, he would sometimes say that quote and say, hey, and we could all relate to it. Another thing he was exceptional at is he memorized all our numbers. And so you could go and say, okay, at this time in the practice, I'm going to be playing outside hitter. We're going to be doing this drill, this important piece. And, it was very color coordinated, and I like that. And I could just tell, obviously Coach Warman used to be a teacher. When you look at him, it's like, okay, he was a teacher. And so I love the organizational piece. I love the color coordination. I love that. And it just, I thought it gave him more street cred, where it's like, man, he put some time into this, as he should. He was a college head coach. Another one who I thought was the absolute best at lesson planning, and he was just good. And he would explain to us, it's like, if you have a great lesson plan and stick with it, it can raise your team from a 7 to a 10. Is Coach John Cook, who was also a teacher. He taught at Francis Parker in San Diego, and just very thorough with his lesson planning, had it printed out, typed out to a T. And it's funny because, yes, my practice plans, Miles, are Kevin Pratt's fingerprints, and it is, part of my programs, but it stems a lot from those two guys. And I'm so appreciative and I would encourage all of you, young coaches out there, create lesson plans and tweak, and it's okay. And Coach Miles might talk about it. You can switch on the fly for sure. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think going in with an idea is obviously a very great way to be successful.
Yeah. I mean, I think that quote of the day is powerful, and I've always tried to use, some form of teaching at the beginning of it to try and get us in the right direction for practice. I don't necessarily write out a practice plan as detailed maybe as you do, but like you said, I certainly have an idea coming in what I want to do. And, I think for both of us, we teach. And so, and like you said, those two coaches taught, I think there's some value in knowing how to structure kind of your practice for the day and then move forward with it. And like you said, something's not quite going the way you want it to. You got to be able to pivot away from that. You don't want to just stick to your practice plan because you took, an hour to plan it, and now you're feeling like, oh, this isn't working. It's important to be able to adapt and change. I know for me, that's one thing that some people may like to plan on Sunday their whole week worth of practices. For me personally, I look at one practice at a time, and I then try and focus on the next day. What did we not do well the day before? Or if it's after a match, what do we not do well in that match? I want to specifically focus on that and try and put it in a drill that mimics what we were doing wrong and fix those things. And so that's the way I like to look at practice planning and kind of break it down.
I like you. I appreciate what you said there. Is I do a day to day, because when you have a practice, you might be like, well, we didn't get that concept. We need to work on that again. But another thing, and you've talked about it, another podcast we've done with this channel, is I think it's so important to scan your environment. I think you need to know your clientele. And I think if you're a college coach, it is a different level of practice plan. I think if you're an elementary school and you're doing volleyball, I don't know the value of having this really, really detailed on a board lesson plan, because the students wouldn't even understand it. However, what's worked for me, and it's, as you know, Miles, I'm a kind of an all-in extremist, and I believe in what we're doing, but I happen to coach at Wave, which is in Del Mar, and I coach at the Bishops, which is in La Jolla. And what I have found is it's really important to me that my clientele, the parents and the student athletes, know that I'm invested in the program and I want them to feel part of the community. And again, this is not college. I would not do this at the college level, but I send the lesson plan to all the parents and I send it to the students. And the reason I do it is it's like, you know, you guys are paying for this service. This is what we're going to provide. This is what we're doing. And a lot of coaches sometimes it'd be interesting to get your thought. They think that I'm walking the plank and they think that it's like, whoa, you're really narrating your whole season. I've had very, very few issues. And on the contrary, the parents tend to like respect more of like, wow, this is what they're doing. This is how invested this coach is. But I've also had, and it is actually a great story, and it made me tighter with this parent. Is a parent called me one time about my lesson planning and talked to me about it, and I didn't include every kid's name in one of my practice plans, and it was so good to hear from that parent. And her and I are still dear friends, and her son graduated a while ago, and she said, make sure you include all their names because at that age, they're young and they don't sometimes know how to come up to you and say, it hurt my feelings that my name wasn't on the lesson plan. So I've only reaped benefits of sending my lesson plan. You might meet an AD and you might be in an environment where an AD would be like, do not do that. Then I wouldn't do it. But where I work at Wave and Bishops, it's worked. And it is set a tone and set a culture that how serious practice is. That is very detailed.
Yeah. And I think, like you're saying, you got to know your environment. And I think that's something we're going to continue to talk about throughout this week. And I think that's something that all the coaches we've interviewed so far really is you know what your environment is and then know who you are. You know, I know for me coaching at a high school that I don't know that sending out the practice plan would be, you know, I don't know how much that would affect anything. It might just give extra work to me, which would be fine. I generally have a loose practice plan. Again, I like to know what I'm going to do at this beginning, middle, and end. And then I kind of like to go from there and see where we need to take practice. And I think too, one thing, especially at the high school level and even, I mean, high school club too, like you said, a lot of these kids don't know how to necessarily come to you with, you know, with issues, or they may be coming to practice with issues. And, you know, I like to have that flexibility in my practice planning where, you know, if I see kids are off that day, a lot of times, especially in my experience with girls volleyball is that, you know, you might have the whole team, something might have happened that day and they're really affected by it. You need to be able to just stop for a minute, take them and sit them down and talk to them. And so that's one thing that I like to know in my practice plan. I have some flexibility.
That's a really good point. I think that I call that kind of the art of coaching, you know, because at the end of the day, you're a teacher, you're a coach. And I honestly think in a sense, you're kind of an artist and you're sitting there scanning your environment. And I see that and I see the value in that. And one thing I do like about writing the lesson plans out for, at least for me, what works for me is, they're saved. They're on email. So I can look up a lesson plan that I've done in like 2010, you know, and I can say, hey, how have my practices evolved? And, but another thing too, is that we've said it, I can't stress enough. You need to know your environment. Like at Bishops, you know, I think the kids are pretty well read and they're pretty academic. So they actually dissect those lesson plans and for me, I have found they come in and we get more out of practice because they can read things very quickly and understand. And they're like, okay, this is what's going on today. But I think you're exactly right. I think some schools and some environments, it's not necessary or it would feel like more homework and that's fine too.
Yeah. And I think one point you said too about like elementary volleyball, you know, maybe even if you're coaching a 12s or 14 and under team. I know in working with those kids, at least where I was coaching, I didn't have like a gym with a whiteboard right there to be able to write everything down. But I generally like to tell them at least everything we were going to do that practice, because at that age, at least, you know, if you're always starting practice off with setting and passing, a lot of those kids, especially the boys, want to get to hitting, they want to get to serving, they want to start playing games. So I think you don't have to break down every drill with every little detail, but it's good to tell them like, hey, you know what, in a half hour after we've worked on these things, we're going to get a chance to hit. We're going to get a chance to do some deep court. We're going to get a chance to play 6-on-6, and that keeps them excited and moving forward. And, you can kind of give them incentives along the way saying, hey, if you can hit these numbers, then we'll get to it that much faster. And it kind of keeps them motivated throughout the practice as well.
For sure. I think when you're 5 years old all the way, till you're 80, I think, people like routines. And then as you as the instructor, the coach, I think when you're establishing routines and the cadence of practice, I have found with girls, boys, men, women, all ages of volleyball, they seem to have more success, and the practices seem to flow a little bit more when it's structured, whether it's like you said on a whiteboard, emailed out before, or even just on a little notepad that you as the coach sees, but you articulate that to the student athlete. I think that's smart.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think today, we went over a lot of different things when it comes to practice planning. I think the main takeaways need to be that you need to be true to yourself, and then you need to know your environment. Obviously, if you're somebody who really doesn't like writing practice plans, but you have a boss or you have, players or parents that are really asking for you to do that, then, you need to step up your game a little bit and do that. And, same thing goes the other way. If an athletic director is really worried that, you might pigeonhole yourself into something, if you send out a practice plan, then you know what, you need to just, again, kind of keep that notepad for yourself. But, make sure you build in some time, some flexibility for, some hiccups along the way, and, try and start practice off in the right direction, whatever that is for you and your team. For both of us, I think we enjoyed that quote of the day. Finding it, I think it helps center even us as coaches on what our goal is for the day. And, the drills that follow that hopefully kind of match up with that, and your talk and your intensity will match that quote for the rest of the day. So, yeah. So anyway, all right. Tomorrow we're going to be looking at just kind of keeping things simple. Oftentimes as coaches, we try and kind of overwork things, and we want to keep things going and keep it simple. So we'll be back here tomorrow talking about keeping your volleyball simple as possible and moving forward.
Hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you like the shirts we're wearing in today's episode, they got a cool logo provided to us by One Stone Apparel. Check them out at onestoneapparel.com. Great shirts, apparel, PE uniforms, volleyball uniforms, anything you need. Check them out, onestoneapparel.com.